Alexander Ledger, revered in the world of wine and owner of the biggest private collection of wine valued at over $140 million, has passed. His estate and wine collection will go to either his estranged daughter Camille or his brilliant student and spiritual son, Issei Tomenei. The strange method to determine which person will inherit this is through a blind taste test of 3 wines. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Road Goes Ever On and On. What you just heard is the exciting setup to the new Apple TV series Drops of God, based off the popular manga of the same name. Every week we'll be talking about a different episode in this compelling TV series. This week, we're talking about the first episode. And just like if you want to get the most from wine, you need to swirl, sniff, sip, and savor. If you want to get the most from our channel, you need to like, subscribe, and hit the little bell icon. Last but not least, if you haven't already seen the episode, it is important to say, spoilers ahead. That being said, I really want to get into kind of the first question of what I thought when I was done with this, which is, why make this elaborate test? Why not just give the estate to one of them or the other, or why not split it? It seemed like a very specific choice, and so I kind of wanted to explore that. What are your thoughts on that?
I have a couple theories about it. What if. Okay, this is, I think, the most out there theory. But what if Alexander is basically trying to set up Camille and Issei? Like, what if he's trying to set them up? And so he knew that Camille has this wonderful palate, this wonderful gift. She has his blood. She can do what he can do. And I say, Issei?
Issei.
Issei, he has this gift as well that is not his biological son, but a spiritual son. And what if this was his elaborate plot to set them up together? That would be maybe the only reason, or the other reason I think that maybe it's a test, because he has built such a loving relationship with his spiritual son, and he has always had that. It does seem like he has always had a love for his daughter. Like, there is a lot of clues that say that he loves his daughter more than how he acted to her, or how Camille feels about how he loved her. So
There's real tenderness in some of those scenes.
oh yeah, between the recording, we see that he has pictures of her. It makes me believe that, it's like he wants to give it to her. Like, it's mostly that he would want to give it to her, but because he's so estranged from her, maybe she doesn't want it, maybe she won't go through the tests, then he would want to give it to his spiritual son. But I have one question real quick before we
Okay,
get.
yeah.
I do want to know your theory too, but my one question is, you had mentioned earlier in the opening that they are doing 3 tastes of wine. How do we know all 3 tests are wine tasting? What if the first test is wine tasting and there's 2 other tests that aren't wine tasting?
That is a very solid point that we definitely don't know the answer to. That's a very solid point. I do think it is wine tasting, and my theory behind it, which I'm actually going to get farther into my justifications behind this a little bit later in the show,
Okay.
is I think it's about the journey, not the destination. So what I'm kind of thinking here is that the prize is a carrot to get her to go along this journey in order to learn who he is and why he made the choices that he made. I think that there are going to be things that are revealed by the choices of the wines that will help him to understand, or that'll help her to understand who he is. And so I think that she wouldn't have necessarily done that since he was gone from her life for so long, unless there was a reason. And that reason is, you have to do this because that's the only way you can get the estate. And so that's how she gets to know who her dad was.
And goes full deep into the wine tasting, the whole experience of knowing where all the grapes are from, what vintage, which estate, and okay.
Like I said, I'll dig a little bit more in, a little
Okay.
farther in, because there is something kind of key that comes out that I think really points towards what could possibly come from a blind tasting that could teach or show her anything. We'll kind of get to that, but that's my thought is that there is some message, some story he's trying to pass on, some understanding of who he is, so he can bridge that gap that there's so many events in her life that she missed. He doesn't know who she is, and she doesn't know who he is. And I think that that journey is going to show that.
So, do you think that's why in his video he said this? He basically says this test is here for us to get to know each other better. Now, when he says for us to get to know each other better, is he going to get to know her from this test? Or is it like he's getting to know her from a spirit, like from the beyond? Or
You
is he
know, I
alive?
did I did at one point kind of wonder that same question, whether or not this could be an elaborate ruse. And the mom even says that he's manipulative. It's probably a trick. So the seed has definitely been planted that there could be something like that. But it definitely seemed genuine. You know, it's not like it was a closed casket. We did see a body. She did see a body. So I'm leaning towards he's moved to this kind of spiritual aspect, and so in kind of a sense of, you know, we're all still a part of this world. That's kind of how he's going to get to know her.
Gotcha. Now, speaking of the mom saying that he's manipulative, I had noticed that Camille's mom was always commenting on her dating. She seemed to be kind of micromanaging Camille's life. Do you think that maybe Alexander is not necessarily a bad guy in what he was doing, and that mainly a lot of it was sort of a brainwash from her mom of like saying like, oh, he's no good, he's manipulative, he's doing this, he's just trying to buy his way into your love? Do you think that Camille's picture of him has been painted by her mom?
Yes and no. I definitely think that she has heavily influenced her daughter's thoughts. I do think that Alexander is not a great. He says that he's a shitty dad. His words.
Right.
So he is aware of that, and I think it's possible that her mom drove him out because he wasn't taking care of them. He was just focused on the wine. If he did focus on his daughter, it was somehow in relation to wine, you know, so maybe she wasn't really being taken care of. She pushed him out. So maybe it wasn't necessarily his choice, but at the same time, I do feel that he is probably has more to blame than she does. I don't think that she's necessarily a perfect person. We do see her saying things like, I know what's best for you,
Yeah.
and talking about her daughter being fragile. So it definitely seems like she's possibly overly protective and kind of micromanaging. And I think some of those are natural mother like things. And so I think she may have some faults, but I don't think she is the main one.
Okay, because the other thing that made me think that was he talks about the domain when they go to the domain and she was doing all the wine testing. It seems like it was something that Camille loved and that her mom hated her doing it. There's a part where she's about to leave to go back to Paris and she gets a phone call and it's her mom. And after that phone call, she hangs up on it, or she doesn't answer it. She hangs up and then she goes and watches the video from her dad. So I feel like there might be a little bit more to it. I don't think the mother's innocent, but I don't think also Alexander's innocent as well. But I will say that he does seem to be, at first he was painted in a very like negative light of how he treated Camille at a young age, how he didn't speak to her for a long time. But then when you like kind of see into his personal life, we see more of, these photos, her book.
Right? Her book is on his desk, not in his library, tucked in with all the other books.
Right.
It's right there on the desk as something that he constantly looks at or reads or just maybe that helps him think of her.
And we do see that he's an accomplished writer too. And his bookshelf there is every year of wine tasting and all the different, like, what's the best wine and all the publishings of that. So it does run in the family that she would write a book.
Right.
Now,
Yeah, and so what were your thoughts on that? So it was, almost kind of like a blink and miss it thing that was her book. Her name was on the top, but it's flipped over pretty quickly, and then her picture is there, but it's not necessarily the main focus. Do you kind of have any thoughts on this book and what it might mean and if it has any significance?
so what I took from it, so I looked up the title of the book is La Boule, and that means translated to the bubble. And to me, I feel like the bubble is the journey of her experience with her dad, possibly, where we see that she is in the domain and he's teaching her all these things. And what do bubbles do? They
They
pop,
burst.
they burst. And I'm thinking that like the bubble was that like domain, like this thing that she loved and she enjoyed, and it got to a point where the tension was too much and the bubble pops, and then all of that is gone. What are your thoughts?
She does say that she keeps writing the same book just in different ways. So I don't think that this is necessarily a memoir. I don't think that, at
Right.
22 years of age, you don't just keep writing books about yourself. You don't have that much interesting. But I do agree with you that I do think that it is very much about her. So I think that it's probably a work of fiction, and whatever characters are in it, their turmoil, their choices are very much, described in the life that she had. In fact, there's a great quote that the Julian, the gentleman she meets at the bar, says to her, "A moment lost is a moment lost forever." And to me, that speaks of all the moments that she's lost with her dad. So her graduation, he doesn't show up. He just calls and says, "Good
Good
job."
job.
We find out that he intended on drinking a bottle with her on her 18th birthday, but he doesn't. He's been gone this whole time. He's lost so many things. And even if he tried to come back into her life, those moments are lost forever. He could try and get into her life at that point, but that's gone. And so it does very much feel like a story that is informed by her personal struggles, even if it's not exactly about
Right.
her. It may be more like an allegory for that, where their characters go through very similar things. I think it is very informed by by her experiences in her life.
So, timeline wise, the last time he spoke to her was 11 years ago when she graduated, roughly around her 18th birthday, I would assume. And it seems like he's been out of the picture, I believe, 15 years. I believe it that.
He's been gone for 20 years.
Oh, 20 years. So
Yep.
I guess my question is, if he had this bottle of wine that he wanted to drink with her on her 18th birthday, why didn't he drink that bottle with her?
I think that speaks to promises not kept. The mother makes a comment about that she gets excited by these promises and let down when they aren't kept. And I think that is one of those things. He might have good intentions, he might truly have a love for her, but in the end, he's only good at one thing, and it's wine. So I think he's I think the reason that he has so much love with the people in Japan is only in the wine and service industry. It's people that absolutely revere him for his knowledge and for what he can give to them in relation to wine. I think that he's touched so many of those people and he just can't connect to anything else.
To me, that wine doesn't seem like it was a promise to her, but a promise to himself, because like she didn't even know about the wine. So is that,
Right.
you still think that that's like a promises kept thing?
I mean, I think it was an intention that he had. I'm certainly curious to see where they go with it, but I can't tell if there is something that really was preventing him, like her mom maybe. But it does seem to me like he has accepted in his video, it does seem like he has accepted the role of the bad guy, and he doesn't seem to be putting the blame on anybody else. He says, "You're going to think all of these things of me," and maybe she can forgive him at some point.
Or maybe it's all put on by the mother, and he is, maybe he tried. What if he tried to reach out to her for the 18th birthday, and the mom said, don't even try. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know.
It's it's possible.
But it brings the question, why doesn't she drink alcohol then?
That's a weird one for me because when she says that she doesn't drink alcohol, she follows it up with "it's complicated," which to me is a weird phrase to say because some people that just raises questions. Is that a choice? Is it something you can't handle? Like why is it? And I feel like it would be much easier to not have people think weird things of you or ask questions in their head to simply say something like I'm allergic to it
Right.
or I have a condition or something along those lines would be a very simple way of saying it's not on the table.
And it does seem like it is a condition. Like every time she has alcohol, she at least gets a bloody nose. We
Right?
get a little hint of something else, maybe, but she at least gets a bloody nose every single time. So it does look like it's a physical condition. So that seems like that would be an easy thing to explain and just say, I can't. It gives me bloody noses if I drink alcohol.
Right. And I do think she has some kind of condition because we do see 4 boxes of a drug labeled lidocaine, 40 milligrams each, that she puts into her bag as she is preparing to go to Tokyo.
No,
And we see that when she does pack for Tokyo, it's a very small bag, so she's not planning on being there long. It's it's an interesting kind of disparity between the quantity of drugs that she brings and the quantity of like clothes that she brings.
right. We even see that when she goes to her father's funeral, she doesn't even have black and white attire. It's just she's got a blue shirt, which I did think that that was a very stylistic choice by the the production team or the director, whoever decided that, because it really showed her that she was this outside person, this like not part of this group of people that knew him, like everybody doing the bone ceremony.
Right?
She clearly stood out. Confirm your point that you said earlier about these people being people in the wine industry. He, they say the family sits in front at his funeral, and she's the only one sitting there. Like he doesn't have a single brother that comes out, uh, a estranged cousin that comes out, an aunt, an uncle, a bastard son out there. Like he doesn't have any of that, and like even his spiritual son doesn't sit in the front. Now back to the lidocaine. Is it? is it? It's not lidocaine like the numbing agent, right?
No, it definitely wasn't lidocaine. It was a drug that I think might be made up because I really struggled to find anything on Google about this. It wasn't until I went to Google Scholar
Mm-hmm.
and put it in that I was only able to find 3 pages of result total that
Oh,
had the word lidocaine in them. And I think every single one of them was a foreign paper. So it either is made up or maybe it is a foreign name for a drug. And I struggled with reading all of the different languages because all of them weren't the one language I know.
which is
English.
oh man, he could have fooled me, but yeah, that's okay. That's fair. That's fair. Do you have an idea of why Camille is estranged with her dad?
I mean, I just think that that comes down to him being gone this whole time and the and kind of how that has made her feel. I think that she does still remember those kind of happy feelings that she had. And so there's just a lot of probably hurt and confusion about why he would just disappear, why he would go from somebody that they had this great kind of secret thing that they did together that she was so excited about, had a personal connection that she didn't have with anybody else to just gone. And and I think so kind of going back to when you were hinting at, could it possibly be the mom kind of has the bigger role. You mentioned in the funeral that the front row was completely empty, which I think that makes it clear that he is very much the problem in his family. Because this isn't just an issue with his wife or ex-wife. This is an issue with literally everybody in his family that I think he's left all of them for one reason or another.
Well, but here's the interesting thing, because it doesn't seem like he left Camille, because the Camille and him did this tasting in the domain. She
Hmm.
grew up in Tokyo. It doesn't seem like he left her.
She grew up in Paris, I think.
No, it definitely says she grew up in Tokyo because
Oh,
that's how
that's
she knows how
you're
to
you're
speak
correct.
Japanese.
Yes.
And that's why
Yep,
they
yep,
were at
yep.
the domain. So it doesn't seem like the dad left her. It seems like they left him. That's the other reason I think it's the mom. I think the mom took her and
Okay.
it was like the mom, this is a prediction, theory alert. Pew, 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 theory. Um, Her mom wanted to move away from the domain, all of the wine stuff, and she said, "Leave the wine behind and come with us." And he couldn't leave the wine behind. And that's partially my theory of what happened in this relationship.
I could possibly see something like that. We'll see. I wanted to talk briefly about a comparison of the two main characters, Issei and Camille, because I do think that there are a lot of things that they have alike, and then there are some things that are striking differences between them. I think they're both around 29, 30 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I think they both have reliances on their family. So Camille lives with her mom. Issei rents a house from his parents
Mm-hmm.
and has a car that came from, I think, his grandfather.
Graduation
So
gift from his grandfather. Yep.
graduation gift, but to some extent, somewhat reliant on their family more so than you would normally expect from someone around 30 years old.
Right.
And and so in many ways I think you kind of see similarities between them in that aspect. They also both seem to not have relationships with significant others. I do think that the reasons are very different, and I think that's where they really start to diverge. It seems to me like Issei is somebody who is laser focused. He knows exactly what he's trying to do. He knows what he wants, and he's working very hard on it, and he's making tough sacrifices because of it. I think that's why he's choosing to not have relationships and why he's choosing to live in a place that he rents with his from his parents rather than spending that money on anything else. It's probably extremely expensive to have to purchase all of these wines to be able to blind taste them and to get experience with what all of these things taste and smell like. Versus, it seems to me like Camille doesn't know who she is and doesn't want to make deep connections with somebody that could hurt her. So she's having relationships, but it's with 22 and 40-year olds that neither of them are going to take her. The young ones aren't going to take her seriously because they're young and they're going to want to move on to somebody else.
Right.
And the old ones aren't going to want to take her seriously because he literally has a wife and kids.
Right,
So
right,
she's a
right.
side thing. She doesn't want to make a connection with somebody that I don't think she wants to give the keys to her heart.
Right. Right. I do think that yeah, she is vulnerable. Now, I don't think Issei is necessarily laser focused and he's not looking for relationships. I think that he is looking for almost the perfect relationship. He goes to the bar, or he's already sitting at the bar, and he's drinking wine, and this lady that seems like she's from another very wealthy family, they've been set up on this date to talk about or to see if they have any chemistry, and she makes a comment about wine. You know, she says you're just sniffing like a dog and it's all the same. Yeah, like you don't need to know how to smell it, you can just look at the label. And he says to her, and it's so good what he says to her, he says, I don't, just want to be with somebody that just judges somebody right off the bat. And to me what he was saying was, you look at wine, you just look at the label, you don't care about the smell, the taste, the depth of the wine. You just look at the label and you get everything you need from that label, and there's no point into finding out the history, the estate, the vintage. You don't care about that, and that's your superficial. And he has that care for it where he goes deeper, so he's looking for something that's not superficial. And I think that that is what he's looking for. And I do think that Camille is going to be that person, because he says in the beginning, the very first scene of the show, he says, I was the best at wine until I met her. And I think that her ability to not just judge wine by its cover, to really dive deep and know where it's from, the tastes, the flavors, smell, I think he's going to fall in love with her.
Interesting. She doesn't have the knowledge. She didn't actually get all of the instruction on how those aromas and characteristics pertain to wine. I think that her amazing ability, and I think some of it has to be something innate. I do think that she is probably a super taster. And I think that she's going to be able to use that with help from somebody else to be able to connect the dots of, if you taste this, this, and this, and you see this, and you smell this, then you can say that's probably this. Whereas I think that he's been immersing himself in the books, doing the tastings, doing all of that. I think he's very much stronger in so many ways, but I think that that palette is something that he just doesn't even understand how it is so next level, even compared to his that he's been training for this long. So I do think she has kind of an innate ability that gives her an advantage in that one area, but that's not the only part when you're tasting wine. You have to have that knowledge to be able to connect the dots of, okay, I got these characteristics, but what does that even mean?
Right. I could see that, but I still think he's gonna fall in love with her. I think he's gonna fall in love with that palette. He's like, with your palette and my knowledge, we could rule the world.
When our powers combine,
Shape of a bucket.
right? And I'm Heart. It's
Two different
why
things.
are you
Couple
here?
different things. Those are Wonder Twins, Captain Planet. Those are two different things.
I did want to ask you about something that Issei said,
Yes.
and it was so short it would be easy to notice. So he informs his family about his teacher's death, and his dad asks him how he feels about that, and he did start saying he was old and sick, but it's rather strange. And then he's cut off by his mom, who's very unhappy with the choices he's made in his life. And I thought that was a very strange combination of words. Do you does this mean anything, or am I just reading into it? And if it does possibly mean anything, what could it possibly mean?
Oh, I think it definitely means something. And this is part of why I'm also leaning into the theory that he's still alive. So I think
Okay.
he was like, he's old and sick, but he wasn't like on his deathbed. Like, that's where I feel like that is going, where it was like he was old and sick, but it's strange. I didn't think he was gonna die. You know, like, he seems very taken aback by this whole thing as well. And there's already a bunch of secrets behind it. Also, the lawyer was saying when they talk with the lawyer, where he says, you know, I met your father a couple months ago at a party, so like wasn't sick enough to that he was at a party, and he said, I want you to draw up my will, which as a lawyer, that's not a weird question to get, you know, like if you are around an older age and you ask a lawyer, hey, I'd like to draw up a will, the lawyer wouldn't think that that's necessarily weird, unless to me he was like, I'm going to draft up this huge will, it's going to be used at this point, like, and maybe the lawyer didn't think that he was looking as sickly or had, I don't know. I
I wondered that same thing because my first thought was that he was saying that it was strange that Alexander was asking him to draft up a will, but at his age, and even if he had some type of disease that was causing him to get worse over time, so he knew it was coming, but early on he had enough vitality that he could still go to parties. It would make sense that's exactly the point that you would draft up a will,
right.
is you're old and you're sick. Then I was kind of thinking that maybe the part that he was saying was weird was the actual will itself. Like
The
maybe
test.
when Alexander approached him, he said, "Hey, I'd like help with making the will, and before you accept, I want to make sure you're okay with this because I'm not just giving away my estate. It's one of these two people, and they have to pass a test in order to get it."
Hmm. Yeah, I guess that could be. Maybe it was referring to the test itself being weird, but it just seems like everybody seems weird about that whole thing. You know, Issei looks weird about it. The lawyer sounded weird about it. Like, one of the only people that doesn't seem too weird was Luca. But I don't know. I don't know.
He seemed to have knowledge and specifically said, "I promised I wouldn't say anything."
Right.
So I think he was aware of it. In fact, there was kind of a telling look in his face when he first found out in his restaurant that she didn't drink. He had kind of a weird smirk, like, "Well, good luck with this."
You don't drink at all? None? Not even a drop? Oh god! This could be a short
Yeah,
series. We're gonna have to.
right.
Episode 1 ended. She doesn't drink, it goes to Issei.
Oh yeah. So I wanted to briefly talk about the music because
Yes.
I did very much enjoy it in this series. I didn't think it was like some where it stuck out as this thing that was like really amazing, but I did feel like was it was good original music. It did a good job of setting the tone, whether that was letting you know the location, a song with the right sound, letting you know, hey, we're in Tokyo, or maybe the tone was, a minor key to let you know that it's kind of more somber. But then also it had some other kind of tricks up its sleeve, like when Alexander calls up Camille after years of not talking to her. They're in a club and there's this kind of like club type beat that's going on in the background. She gets the call. He says that he's sick. He says he's very sick and that he's dying. And the music is getting kind of quieter. And then this one note that's in the music just holds. And to me, it sounded like the EKG of a dying person. It just completely flatlined.
Oh.
And to me, it was letting us know that this is happening soon, like almost like nowish that it's happening. And then she gets
Interesting.
very unhappy with him that he wants her to drop everything she's doing and go right now tonight. And so she says she'll think about it. And she hangs up, storms away. And as she goes back into the bar, it does a really good job of picking back up into that kind of like bar type beat, and
Right.
getting that like amped up atmosphere as she's worked up to a point where she's ready to do just about anything. And so I did think that it had these kind of interesting moments where it was tastefully scored. I
I
don't know if this is an album I'm going to listen to
no.
outside of the show, but I did feel like at each of the moments it did a good job of helping set things up.
I actually agree. I agree completely. There were three very noticeable songs for me. There was and what's cool about these songs is they were also introductions. So the first song we hear, it introduces us to Paris, and we see Camille, and it's a French song. It's a song sung in French. And then when we go over to Tokyo, we hear a song that is in Japanese. And who do we meet? Issei. And there was a third song, and it wasn't right when we met Luca, but when we went to Luca's restaurant, there was another very significant song that seemed like it was the introduction of Luca. So, of the three, like, really main songs that I had heard that were like almost like needle drops, it seemed like they were for each character introduction. So, we had Camille's, Issei's, and Luca's. I thought that was pretty neat. I thought they did a really good job with the music.
And when we were seeing Luca in his restaurant, there was a great choice with the filming when they did the wine service scene. Sometimes it can be tough to when you have scenes that are cutting between back and forth over people's shoulders, so you can kind of see a shot of somebody's face. It can be tough to keep continuity if somebody's eating. It's like the level of food, the level of drink that's in there. Sometimes
How
things in
much bunk cake
continuity
you
can
eat?
how much bun cake you can eat. Those things in continuity can kind of slip. And what I really liked about the scene where they're first sitting down and finally actually kind of talking a little bit, Luca and Camille, Miyabi is doing a wine presentation. And they showed the wine presentation from start to finish, regardless of whose shoulder they were looking over. They made sure to include her in the shot. And as they're switching back and forth, it is in that exact same like next spot of the wine service. And they did a good job of showing all of the steps. There might have been some minor things that I would do differently. If it's not a bottle I'm decanting, I generally hold it rather than putting it on the table. But I did like the fact that she wasn't jostling it. She did not move the label from facing forward when she cut the foil. She moved her knife around both sides.
Oh.
She did a great job of kind of all of the different steps. She even wiped the top of the bottle with the serviette after pulling out the cork. It was just kind of a well done scene, and I like the fact that they put that little extra care to make sure that all of that was shown.
Now, how do you know so much about that?
It's funny you ask. So, I am actually a sommelier, and I did want to take a very short moment. I don't want to railroad any of this, but I did want to take away some of the mysticism from anybody that is ordering a bottle of wine at a nice restaurant. You can sometimes feel uncomfortable when a waiter comes to the table and does all these things and expects you to do certain things in return, and you don't always know what you should do with that. So one of the first things is oftentimes they'll present you the bottle after they've gotten it. And that's just to make sure that what you ordered is what's there. So if there is a vintage producer, level of quality on that wine, grape, whatever it is, that whatever you ordered, that is what it is. Generally, that is going to be correct. Sometimes you'll see that the vintage changes and they haven't updated the list. That's always a good one to take note of when you're ordering and then just look at it on the bottle. In a lot of mass produced wine, I don't think that vintage really matters that much between. But when you're looking at a wine that maybe had some age that you were kind of interested in, you see something that is 7 years old or even older than that, and then the bottle comes back and it's, a 5 year difference or 4 years. I would probably want to see if they have that other bottle. So the next thing they may show you or give you the cork. And some people don't know what they should do with this. Should they sniff it?
I think I
Corks
know.
generally smell.
Is
Go,
it
go ahead.
they want to show you the cork is intact, that the no pieces of the cork broke off?
You want to see it's more of showing the quality of the cork and
Oh,
and
okay.
seeing that it isn't crumbling. So yes, that it is intact, that there's not anything showing that maybe the bottle wasn't stored properly, and so the cork got brittle and is now breaking. And if that's the case, if it's brittle, air can possibly get in, at which point the wine is going to oxidize too quickly.
Right.
So they're really showing you the quality of the cork. You don't really have to worry too much about this. You definitely don't have to sniff it. It's generally going to smell like cork, and you're probably not going to tell anything about the quality of the wine. So if you don't know what to look for, you can just leave it on the table. You don't have to worry about it. And then the next thing is they oftentimes pour you a taste at that point. And some people don't know exactly what they are supposed to be doing there. Are they supposed to be commenting on the quality of the wine? For the most part, restaurants aren't doing that to see if you like the bottle. It's not like, do you like this, and then we'll keep pouring it. It's just to make sure that there aren't any faults with the wine. And the most obvious one that you can detect is if there is cork taint, TCA, trichloroanisole. The wine will probably smell and taste a little bit like wet or moldy cardboard. And so all
Interesting.
you're doing at this point is just making sure that there aren't any faults with the wine, that it's not a bad bottle. So give it a little smell, give it a little taste, make sure it's not bad, but there's nothing weird about it. You don't have to worry that they're, expecting you to give tasting notes or anything along those lines. You give it a little smell, you give it a little taste. If it's not bad, you nod your head and they continue pouring. And that's my 2 cents on what to do if you order a bottle of wine at a nice restaurant.
Tastes like a nice Chianti. 78 or so? That's usually what I say every time. Every time they do that to me, I just guess every time. 78? Is this a 78? Sir, this is a
Every time.
2015. Get out of here.
So this is
This is a Wendy's.
Kendall Jackson White Zinfandel. Ugh.
Well,
Okay,
that's cool.
so I was very wrong.
I had always thought that when you poured the wine, they pour it like this, like they put the thumb in the bottom. Is that wrong? Is that
You don't have to put your thumb in the punt. I generally like to make sure that I am not covering the label, that I'm not manhandling the bottle with my hand in the middle or the top. I'm not using two hands. You generally want to be able to use one hand from,
okay?
the end of the bottle. With some of the heavier bottles, something like, champagne that may have some thicker glass, it's okay to steady the bottle with a finger or two as you're pouring because that can definitely be tough, especially since in the case of champagne, You have to pour super slowly, otherwise the bubbles just fill up and overflow, and you don't actually end up with liquid in there.
Right, it's just all bubbles.
It just straight up bubbles. So yeah, the next part, which is very wine related, which is the reading of the will. Huge surprise that it involves a blind tasting in order to do it. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Camille's experience and kind of what we see happen to her. But first, I alluded to this much earlier in the episode, and so I really want to talk about this here. So the test is weird for blind tasting for two reasons. One, they taste the wine, and then in a month they taste the wine again. Normally, you have a very short period of time to figure out what the wine is. You don't get to go and try and remember what it tastes like and grab a bunch of bottles from the store and see if those match your memory, or talk to other people. It's you taste it and then you have to evaluate it in the spot. That's one. And then two, and what is really sending alarm bells for me is that the three things that he says that they have to identify is the grape variety, the estate, and this is the weird one, and then the vintage. So when you are tasting wine, it's normally region, and depending on what level of a certification you're getting, there may be greater level of specificity that you have to give for that region. Maybe instead of saying that it's a Napa cab, you have to be able to identify that it's from a region inside of Napa, like Rutherford. But they never expect you to say the estate, which is kind of like the brand, or like
The winery.
the name of the company, the winery that, yeah, exactly, that makes that wine. It's never an estate that I'm aware of through the quartermaster sommeliers or the Wine Spirit Education Trust. So here's why I think that that the test is telling a story and teaching her something, is that it's not just these wines are relating to a specific place and time. So it could bring her to a person that was in her father's life, because it would take her to an actual estate,
Right.
and it would take her to that person at a point in time. So it's like, what was this person doing here at this time? It is taking her through a journey of three fixed points in both space and time, which I think there's information you can encode in there, whether it's a message you're trying to give somebody about what your life has been like, or if there was something dastardly that kind of happened, that he's trying to give her that information so that she's aware of the truth of why he was out of her life and why he passed. Maybe he's encoding information related to that, and it's going to be very much a puzzle to get that out based off of, once again, like fixed points in space and time, which is not normally what happens in tasting. And so that was kind of like the key for me.
I have a question. Do you think
Yeah.
when they go to Luca's restaurant and he talks about the one wine, that he's like, there's this wine, he won't sell it, it's, not up for production. Do you think that that estate has anything to do with these tests?
It could.
That
It
because
definitely.
I had a theory that when Luca knew about these taste tests and he brought her to his restaurant, like it was a very significant moment where he said, let's go get something to eat. And they go to his restaurant, and all of these things happen where he talks about this certain wine and he says, it's a great, it's one of the best tasting wines ever. He won't sell it. Your dad has a few, and I've had a few, and this is the wine I want you to taste. Right before the other tasting, and that is another reason I feel like he had that like shock on his face, like, oh, I was going to give her a sample of the first sample so that it would send her on the right path. Do you think that they are this related or
That could definitely be interesting that he, put out an olive branch, and because of her weird circumstances of not drinking, that she didn't realize that that's what it was and didn't take the branch. I think that's a very possible theory. We'll see. I think if it is, I think there is going to be more significance to that than what we've already seen.
right?
So once again, it's not just that place, it's that place in a specific year. So how did that relate to it? Was it when he found the place? Was it, and what was he doing when he found it? I really think that there's going to be potentially a deeper message that can be sent through just these three bottles.
Based on the grape, the estate, and the vintage. So the year, the where it came from, and the type of grape it is. Maybe not so much the type of
Absolutely.
grape, but the at least the vintage in the year or the estate. That seems like a very yeah, you could and we did see later in his cellar that he has stories. Quick question. So we see in the beginning Camille goes to like a mind palace when she is first tasting with him, which also kind of in that first scene when she's doing the tasting shows a little bit of an aggression from Alexander. She's like, "Oh, can I have another taste?" And he's just like, "No." He's like really aggressive, like slamming the table, like so leads also to the theory that he is maybe not the nicest person, but could be a red herring that he's just so into the passion of this that he's just really wants her to know these things without a second taste. But we see that she's in this mind palace, right? So the first time
Mhm.
she can like walk around, she picks everything up, she smells it, it's foggy, and then she takes a sip of this wine, and we know she hasn't drank any alcohol since forever long for however long, and she drinks this, and in her mind palace we see an explosion of color, and to the point she breaks the glass. It's like so intense for her. What do you think that is?
I think it's a representation of sensory overload.
Okay.
She with when she was doing the tastings with her dad, it was one thing at a time.
Right.
And so she was able to, when she went into her mind palace, she could go back to scent memories she had and really think of a time that she smelled these flowers and what did they smell like, and this mushroom, what did it smell like. And she can actually go through and think of that memory, and in that memory she can trace a path, go to something, and access what that smell is like in her memory. But wine is so complex as far as what it is. It's not one isolated smell.
Right.
It is a whole thing. And I think she's having this explosion of memories where it's too much for her to kind of be able to handle. Because I do think that memory is an important thing. Like the that mind palace, if that's what you want to call it, seemed very real world. It was very
Right.
well defined and very specific, and it seemed like a place that she had been. Sent to something that can have very strong memories associated with it, and she's got an amazing nose, which means I think that things tie very strongly in with her memories. And so I think that was just got overloaded with everything. And I think we kind of see that again when she, not obviously that level, but when she goes into her dad's cellar for the first time. Luca takes her in there. And before she gets very far in, she stops. She puts her hand to kind of steady herself. She closes her eyes. He asks if she's okay. And she just says, it's the smell. It's very strong. And so on the surface, that could seem like she's got a sensitive nose and cellars have a strong smell. I don't think it's just that. I think that
It's
that
like
took her to the last memory of her dad, that they were doing tastings in a cellar.
cellar.
And and
Oh.
so all of so I think that that brought her right back to, I think it wasn't as much about a strong smell as it was a smell that brought on a strong emotional memory.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Do you think that it was maybe going into the cellar of not being so accustomed to it that she could smell all the variations of wine, and that because she's a super smeller,
Super
that
taster?
super she also might be a super smeller too. Do you think that like that might have done it, or do you think it's just because it was a memory associated with her dad?
I think it was because it was a memory associated with her dad. And I think that just surprised her how after 20 years she could walk into a room without seeing anything, like a picture, anything like that, and instantly be transported to when she was a child doing these blind tastings with her dad.
That I
And so I
didn't.
think that was just like a wash of memories and emotions kind of related to that. And she just needed a moment to kind of center herself. At this point, she still hadn't accepted that she was going to continue with this. She was still planning on leaving the next day back home. So I think she got hit with that memory, but it didn't. She still thought of him as this bad person in her life. So I think it didn't quite strike her with that same chord as when she finally found that note. That then took it the step farther and really caused everything to wash over her, and she starts sobbing in Luca's arms.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that
That's
makes
just
sense.
a thought.
No, I mean I didn't even see it that way. I just thought she was just overwhelmed by, alcohol is not the greatest thing for her, and it was just like an
Right.
overwhelming smell of alcohol. Now in the cellar, we see a couple of notes that are translated for us. And, we see, of course, the one with Camille that he wants to drink on her 18th birthday, which, sends her crying into Luca's arms. We see chicken and mint. We
Yeah.
see the good, bad, and the ugly.
Right.
Do you think the chicken and mint and the good, bad, and the ugly had anything to do with anything?
Not that we can piece out at this point, I don't think.
Okay.
I don't know if we'll ever find out, but I did think the Led Zeppelin live 79.
Yeah, did you find anything out? I want to know what you found out about it.
So that was the year that Led Zeppelin made their last studio album together in the group before one of them died. And it's not one of the most well received. It didn't have the same group kind of collaboration. Half of the group was dealing with addiction, and the other half was pretty straight. So it was kind of a different composition. I think at the time it looks like reviews for it were kind of mixed, and now as time has gone on, some people have looked at it as an interesting possible stepping stone to what they could have moved to. So it definitely seemed like it represented, some interesting kind of notes of both harmony, but also with some, kind of issues under there. So if this is like one of those beautiful but not quite perfect wines, a wine that you could spend a lot of time on, and maybe you can find these kind of issues with it, but at the same time, it's still, compared to any other bottle or any other band, still phenomenal.
Right.
Is
So
is kind of what I thought, that description might be.
I think I got a different little view of it. So
Okay.
what I was looking up was they did get an album out. So I was focused on Live 79.
Right.
And Zeppelin was touring every year until about 73, and then they did every other year. So it was 73, 75, 77, 79. They were going to tour in 78, but one of the, I forget which one, somebody's son died, and so they put a pause on it. And they did 79. That was their last live show of all of them together. And so, because a year later, the drummer died, and they never did a live show with all of them again from that point. So I took it as that it was a special wine because it was the last time that. And they performed at a festival. I forget what it was called, but it's in Europe that they were at this festival or performance. And I feel like he was there at that performance and he saw them live, and that is a memory of, the last time Zeppelin was together and full. And just like that bottle of wine is full, same vintage, and it might even come from an estate around there. I do like your take on it of how that wine is, of like, because like how Luca was explaining it, of like he has these reasonings for wines and their names, and he might not know, and he just, why can't we just drink it now? But he always had a
Right.
reason. He always had this like deeper meaning that most people didn't even understand. So I actually like your take on it better.
So, I mean, it's who knows with this show. There's a lot that I think that they are holding pretty tight, so it'll
Yeah.
take time for us to kind of learn exactly what the point is.
And with that, I think that we've come to an end, folks. Our first episode of Drops of God. I'm really excited to see what this show has in the future for us. Are we going to get answers? I'm sure we will. I hope we'll get a second season because I am enjoying this show and I think you will too. So thanks for joining us. If you haven't, hit that like and subscribe button. Turn on that bell for notifications. I'm Mark. That's Sterling. And this is The Road Goes Ever On and On.
Thanks.